Hey guys.
Hi.
Is that how I act?
No, like, so blah blah blah. Alternate for the 18,000th time.
Yeah.
This is Elijah. Say hi, Elijah.
Hi.
And this is Emmy. Say hi.
Hey! What do we have it?
Yeah, you get a good whack in the head probably.
Yeah. That's the alternator.
That's the air filter box right there. Yeah.
What about that? Is that the alternator? Wait, what is that thing?
This?
Is that like a big jumble of stuff or what?
Yeah, basically.
It looks like Grandma's basement.
It looks like not like our car.
That's how we are going.
We are, aren't we? We should get going. How's it going, guys? Well, if you have one of these cars, you might want to tap into an ignition switched 12-volt source to hook up an accessory, or like in my case, get your alternator to charge like it should. So in this episode, I show you a cool way to do just that, and we use some silicone putty to creatively hook it up without tearing into the fuse box or cutting apart the factory wiring. So stay tuned. The factory wiring that supplied the current to my alternator that makes it kick in and start charging doesn't have enough voltage on it to make the alternator start charging. It sounds like I would have to take the gauges out and maybe fix something inside of there, but even doing that may not even fix the problem. So I did what a lot of other guys do, and I ran my own wire to the alternator so I could excite it and make it start charging. But I still need to put it on a switched source so that when I turn on the key, it supplies power to the alternator, and then when I turn the key off, it cuts the power. To get by for the time being, I ran a dedicated wire straight off of the battery into the car and connected it to one side of this switch. Then I ran a separate wire from the other connector on the switch back into the engine bay and connected it to the exciter post on the alternator. I also added this gauge that measures volts, connected one side of the gauge to the power wire, and ran a ground wire from the other side of the gauge that runs down into the footwell and connects to the mount that holds the switch for the back hatch. So I've already got my power wire and my ground wire, so all I have to do now is add a relay somewhere, tap into an ignition switch source, and use that to actuate this circuit I've already got set up. So today we are going to use the wiring that I already have installed, but we are going to add a relay and some fuses and make the alternator work like it should. So one of the weak links of these cars, I would say, is the factory wiring. The connections and stuff can get old, the plastic in the plugs can crack, and the insulation on the wiring can get old and crack too. So I'd really rather not tear apart the fuse box or have to like cut into the factory wiring if I can avoid it. So I pulled out the seat, I got out my multimeter, and I found this white plug that is hanging down a little bit lower than the rest of the harness. And what's cool about it is it's easy to pull apart. It doesn't have any like snaps or anything on it. And the connections that are inside of it are actually pretty easy to remove too. I tested all the connections on that plug as I turned the key on and off, and I found one connection in that plug that actually turns on and off with the key. So we're gonna remove the wires from that plug and tap into that. So I went to Amazon and I picked up this 2-pack of relays, this set of fuse holders, and the most creative part of this project, this 2-part silicone putty. I already had these piggyback wire connectors, braided wire covering, and heat shrink tubing from Amazon. And then I used this 16-gauge wire from Walmart and these wire connectors I got at O'Reilly's. That's one thing about working on this car is it's so dang little. Even with the seat out, it's like a pain in the butt trying to get underneath here. So there's the back of the switch and the gauge that I put in. So we're gonna pull this out, disconnect it, and get a nice shot up my nose. I'm unscrewing the ring that is on the back of this gauge so I can pull it out. Right. The wires. Look at this so I remember how I had it wired. Well, that one's on there, good. I rigged up a jumper wire and I connected it to that wire to make sure that it actuated the relay. And after I knew it worked, then I started looking for a spot to mount the relay. This relay is rated to 40 amps, so the cool thing is I can just wire into it in the future and add whatever electronics I want to the car. Plus, I've got 2 of them, so if the first one goes bad, I have a second one.
I think I'm gonna mount the relay on this bracket right here.
There's already a hole in the brace that runs underneath the dash, so I found this screw and this finger tightable nut that I think came with an odometer gauge I used in the past in my Camaro. That worked perfectly because I can reach in there now and tighten it up by hand, and you don't need a wrench. Just to be safe, I'll put a fuse on both of them. These are just like really inexpensive, generic. Obviously you have to cut them. All right, so I'm gonna put a fuse on both the 12-volt switch source coming in and the power supply going out. It says the white is the ground, which is kind of interesting. I don't know why. And these relays didn't come with any instructions, so I'm using the pictures from Amazon. So hopefully these are right. So I'm going to put the fuse, because of the length of the wires that I have, I'm going to put the fuse on the red wire going to the device and the black wire coming from the switch 12 volt. And then that leaves the ground and battery wire. So the hot will come into the relay. It'll be fused on the back side. So it'll be fused coming in from the 12 volt ignition source and fused on the back side going out to the alternator. That makes sense too, because they're both on this side of the plug. So I'm just going to snip these off and then hardwire the fuses in. So I used butt connectors to splice on the fuses and then added the spade connectors to the ends of all the wires, covered it with that braiding and sealed the ends with some shrink tubing, and voila, there's my relay harness. Even though it won't be connected any longer, I'll just use that switch to fill the hole until I get the new dash in the car. They sent with these 2 fuses with the with the fuse holders. And I don't know what size fuse I should use in these things, but I'll look and see if I have some smaller fuses. If not, I'll just use these ones. So we're gonna use a 5 and a 7.5. I'll put the 7.5 in the main battery wire. Up. Man, it would have been awesome if they put the fuse box. Why did it take them so long to figure out to stop putting the fuse box like in shitty places like this, you know? Not bad if I do say so myself. The tools that I ordered by accident when I was working on my mirrors, actually, it's probably going to work for this. So the wire I'm tapping into is purple with a black line on it. And I think these colors are pretty constant, at least through early 944s and 924Ss. All you have to do is get in there with a tool like that and push down on those tangs that stick up and hold the leads inside the plug. Once you push those tangs down, you can just pull the connector right out of the plug. There. Booyah. Alright. So I'm just going to put a piggyback between these then. So I put the plug halfway together there and snapped them together to see how it looked. I think I'm going to take off this and redo it. There was only tape wrapped around the wires on the one side of the plug. So I unwrapped them to give myself a little bit more room for putting this silicone on. And then I redo the tape here in a little bit. I took some alcohol and cleaned off those connectors just to make sure they were clean. And then I bent the piggyback connector a little bit to make sure that that connection was flat, and so that I had enough room to snap the wire onto the piggyback after I got done covering this with silicone. And then I just simply took that piggyback connector and snapped it in between the two connectors. Alright, I'm going to mix up some of that silicone and put it around here. So I came up with this idea myself. This silicone putty isn't advertised for this, but it's kind of like a perfect thing. Basically, I'm creating like my own little socket, and the cool thing is it's not rigid, so if you ever want to take it apart, all you have to do is take a razor blade and cut it apart. So you mix the two parts together, and then once they're a solid color, then you form it into the shape you want and let it sit for about an hour. And after that, the silicone sets up into a rubbery solid mass. And then after that, I took a razor blade and just carved away the top a little bit there to create a relief for the wire that I'm going to be snapping on the top. While the silicone was setting up, I measured it out and made the wire I needed to run from the relay to the new plug.
Alright, I just plugged this wire in. I'm gonna wrap some tape around it. Probably don't need to, but wow, there's a super tiny, is there metal exposed? No, there isn't. Oh, maybe a little bit. So I'm just gonna wrap this tape around here just to be sure. It's a lot of work putting all these, like covering all the wires with loom and everything, but I mean, at least I don't have to worry about this stuff, and it's pretty tidy and not in the way of other stuff. So like so. So I can tie these up now. Snip off these ties and put this back together now. I think this is hard enough. And then connect the wire and test it out.
I'm just going to cut a piece of this the same length and wrap this around those wires before I put the plug back together, and then hook this thing up and test it out. Made in Mexico. Makes me hungry for enchiladas.
Good. Alright, there it is. Back where it was, just with the silicone thing on top of it. I've got it rewrapped with the new tape, secured to the other wire harness so it's nice and solid, nothing's gonna move. It's not touching anything else. Alright, I think we're in pretty good shape. Fuse is hanging down, wires tied up nicely. Fuse box is still accessible. These are higher and pretty solid so that they're not, you know, hanging down too low. Nice and tied up. Everything is sorted out.
It's a moment of truth. All right, so you can see the gauge isn't on. Key in. Boom, shakalaka. That means I'm getting power to my alternator. That's how it's done, son. Well, there it is. Thanks for watching the show, guys. Just like downtown. All right. Be sure to check back for new episodes of Project Porsche and hit that subscribe button. Thanks, guys. See you next time.